The very first rabbit trail we could possibly go down in the study is 3 theories of creation. How did God do it? Because none of us were there. So there are no eyewitness accounts. So, in Genesis is pretty big overview of creation. So, there are specifics involved, but the nitty-gritty details aren't necessarily there. The church, theologians, Bible scholars, scientists, Christians who are scientists, have come up with three theories, 3 ideas of how God created the heavens, the earth, how God created us. And the first one is the young earth theory. If you've studied this at all, this is probably currently the most popular theory. I would imagine if any of you have looked at it, I would say a big percentage of you are going to say, I believe in the young earth theory of creation. The second one is called the gap theory. It is the lesser known of the 3, lesser known, in the church. Fewer people hold to it. We'll explore it a little bit. And then the third one would be day-age theory. This would be one if you study or have thought about creation at all, you've probably heard of this one because it's kind of the counter to the young earth theory, the two of them. Most Christians are going to be in one, young earth theory or day-age theory. And gap theory, as I had mentioned, is probably the held by fewer people. So the young earth theory. The young earth theory says that the earth is only between 6 and 20,000 years old. The number I hear most often is 10,000, 15,000, but I hear 20,000. I hear sometimes numbers higher than that. But the most common numbers I hear are 10 to 15,000 years. 6,000 years. I must have trouble with the word 6. My voice just goes up an octave every time I say 6. 6,000 years is kind of an interesting number. The guy who's really responsible for saying the earth is only 6,000 years old is a guy named Bishop Ussher. He was the Archbishop of Ireland back in around the turn of back around 1600. Which, of course, puts him just a little bit later than Martin Luther or John Calvin, the Reformation. According to his studies, his exhaustive studies of Scripture, of the genealogies, of other ancient writings, particularly Babylonian, concluded that the earth was created by God on October 22nd, 2004 BC.
Man, he must have been really smart.
Sometime after 6 p.m., after the sun went down.
Wow, that's really...
Oops, I pushed the button. So that makes the earth 6,025 years and 25 days old today. If you're asking, why would he pick October 22nd? He concluded that the earth, 2004, he calculated by using the genealogies, and then specifically the death of Nebuchadnezzar, which he felt was a historically established day, and then to compare that to the genealogies in Genesis and in Samuel and Chronicles and Kings to arrive at the year 2004. And then he decided that God would have created the earth on the fall equinox. And even though the equinox is September 21st, on October 22nd, he had some, this is getting way down the rabbit trail here. He calculated the differences between our calendar, we call it the Julian calendar, versus Gregorian. That's the word. We use the Gregorian calendar. He has like 200 pages explaining why October 22nd. Bishop Ussher does. And I don't claim to follow all of his reasoning, but some of the articles I read said, followed it and say he had some valid points to make that if you're going to say it was the fall equinox, God created the time, the seasons, starting with the fall equinox in creation, that October 22nd would have been the equinox for that year. rather than September 21st as we understand it. You know, I remember when I was at Northwest, a couple of my professors would say the useful thing about Bishop Ussher is that he has established the very least amount of time, the earliest date for creation. It couldn't be any shorter than 6,025 years ago. Although there's lots of reasons to say why it could have been longer. That's why, young Earth theory. That's why I was saying the most common dates you'll hear are between 10,000 and 15,000 years rather than 6. But they almost always will say 6 is the very minimum because of Bishop Ussher's work. At least he's the first credited with having done all the math to come up with a date for creation at that level. How could the Earth possibly be that young? Only 6,000 years or 15,000 or 10,000 or 20,000. How could the Earth possibly be that young? Isn't there tons of geological evidence proving the Earth is hundreds of millions of years old, maybe even billions? Billions is a pretty recent, some scientists have been trying to say the Earth is billions. Before it was always hundreds of millions. But the thing is, as they study evolution and they start looking at, okay, what has to happen in order for evolution to be true, they keep deciding they need more time. Evolution needs more time in order to occur. And so you start recently, the last 20 years or so, you start hearing billions of years. So that's why, as I've written these slides, I've put the possibility of billions of years. You have all the fossil records. You have if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, and you look down and you see all the layers, the strata of sediment. How could that happen in only 6,000 years or 10 or 20,000 years? Or carbon-14 dating that is kind of the gold standard of how to date things. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope that decays at a known rate, and so you can measure the decay and say, well, this rock is this many years old because of how much decay this carbon-14 has in it. Explanations for how the Earth could only be for young, 6,000 to 20,000 years old. There are several new Earth proponents who claim that a biblical flood, a worldwide cataclysmic flood, could account for all of the sediment, all of the evidence that scientists today look at and say that the Earth has to be way older than that. Not all young Earth theorists will say this, but this is really common as an explanation for the previous question. And the idea states that just as God created Adam as a fully functional adult male, God also created the Earth as a fully functional adult planet with the appearance of great geological age. That is, if doctors had examined Adam, within hours after he had been created, which is going to be, how can you have doctors to look at Adam when he's the first man? But anyway, if we get past that and say, if we had been able to examine Adam, medical doctors would have concluded that Adam was an adult male who had been on, however we're going to define adult, whether 18, however old Adam was, 18, 20, 21, 25, 30. Maybe you don't think you're an adult till you're 50.
We have lived a lot longer, so we could have been 50.
But Adam would have, for all the tests they could have done, would have been an adult male. They would have been, no, this is not someone who has only been on the earth for only a few hours. They would say, this is a, however old, 25, 21-year-old, however, however.
0-year-old adult.
Yeah, they would not say he was a newborn.
Yeah.
So in the same way, when God created the earth, he would have created an earth that had the appearance of being older, millions, maybe billions of years old. And you know, as you think about it, you know, it would have to be true. I mean, if God creates an earth and he's going to put plants and he's going to put animals and he's going to put humans on it, it has to be an earth that will, you know, support plants, animals, us. You know, you can't just have a planet that's all rock. There has to have been some kind of an erosion to create dirt for the plants to grow in. If you're going to put rivers if God's going to put rivers on his planet on Earth, you know, there's got to be valleys. The rivers has to have valleys to flow down through, and so there's going to be, you know, you're not just going to have high mountains everywhere. You're going to have mountains. You're going to have valleys, and rivers flowing through them. There's going to be oceans, you know, lakes. If you have areas that are going to be flat, you know, that may have once had a lake or maybe an entire ocean that dried up and now you have bare area, you know, God would create an earth that had those features, that looked like it happened millions of years ago, but could have just happened that day because God created it and it was, you know, spoke it into being.
It was good.
It said that it was good.
Yeah. It was good.
And just to be sure, not all, as I mentioned before, not all young Earth proponents will buy into this. And I would say most will a combination will say, yes, God created the Earth to have an apparent age, but also the flood had a lot to do with why things are the way they are today. The gap theory postulates that there is a gap, possibly millions or even billions of years, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2.
That's a big gap.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, we all know it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Gap. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. So gap theorists say that God created the heavens, created the earth, he populated the earth with plants, animals, and humans, or humanoids at least, and that this creation lasted for millions of years. This would account for dinosaurs. According to gap theorists, the dinosaurs, all what we think of as prehistoric, happened in this gap. There's different theories on different ideas and what happened after the gap. Most of them say that this heaven, this earth, this life, these people were all then destroyed in the gap. And the most often explanation is that it was Satan Lucifer being kicked out of heaven onto the earth that destroyed God's original creation. And that's why it was necessary then for God to repopulate the earth. And that's where the story that we have, Adam and Eve, and where we come in. Some gap theorists go on and say that not everything was destroyed, that there were people in particular who survived. And so that was, you know, one of the big question of Abel was where did Abel's wife come from? You know, who did Abel marry? And they would say, well, he married people that were alive before the gap. There is zero biblical evidence for this.
It's just a gap theory that not very many people follow, or believe in.
There is nothing anywhere in the Bible that points to the gap theory.
Okay.
It's all speculation.
Okay, gotcha.
That there was millions of years between verse 1 and verse 2 here. This is definitely the least
least
hill
favorite.
of the three.
Yeah.
All right.
Another rabbit trail here. People who look at, if you're going to Google Bishop Usher and you're going to Google the first day, a lot of articles are going to say Bishop Usher said the first day was October 23rd. But if you search deeper into what he was saying, Bishop Usher said, actually it was saying that the creation of heaven and earth, Genesis 1:1, happened October 22nd in the evening, after sundown. Well, of course there wasn't sundown yet, but in the evening of October 22nd, and that when God created light, spoke light into being,
That was the first beginning.
and there was light and there was darkness and there was the first day. The first day, Bishop Usher will say the first day of creation was
20.
October 23rd.
Yeah.
That was now October 23rd, but the start of creation was the evening before. Reasons to believe in gap theory. Gap theory allows for an earth of advanced age. Gap theory allows for prehistoric people, prehistoric animals to have existed before Adam. Gap theory allows for Adam and Eve to have come on the scene as little as 6,000 or 6,025 years ago. So people who propose gap theory say it answers a lot of questions the other two are not able to answer. You were talking about, how to reconcile science and the Bible, and
Sure.
gap theory claims to do that.
Is that this theory?
Yes, gap theory.
Okay.
Gap theory, because gap theory explains how the earth is millions of years old.
Right.
There is a big gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2.
Well, I wasn't including a gap though, is what.
And people will say about, where are the dinosaurs in the Bible? Dinosaurs lived, millions of years ago, not a few thousand years ago. Read about Adam and Eve, and from Genesis, and it's hard to imagine Adam and Eve lived in a cave and had rocks as tools and didn't know how to build a fire or had no other semblance of civilization or any kind of technological advance, even rudimentary technological advances like fire or like pottery or basket weaving, for instance. When you read Adam and Eve, they appear to be modern, of course not 21st century modern, but at least not prehistoric. As I said before, you can't imagine Adam and Eve lived in a cave. So gap theory says Adam and Eve didn't live in a cave. The people who lived in caves were before Adam. Day-age theory states that the 6 days of creation should not be thought of as 24-hour days, but rather as indeterminate ages, possibly millions of years long. If you studied this at all, you've probably heard of this. You might not, like I said, gap theory may be a new one for you, but you've probably heard this. You should probably think of young earth theory and day-age theory as being opposites, and that young earth theory would definitely postulate that the days of creation were literal 24-hour days, and thus you don't need millions of years. The earth could be only 6,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Could be that young because God created the earth
6,000 years.
in only six literal 24-hour days. Gap theory pretty much says the same thing. It's just that God had an original creation that was millions of years ago. Then he repopulates that creation again, and that's our 6 days of creation. And Adam and Eve, and that's what the Bible tells us about, because everyone else was gone. There is no record of it. So the thing about day-age theory also explains how the earth can be millions of years old, because It says the days of creation could be millions of years long. Each day could have been, an indeterminate length of time. And, as you look at day 6 of creation, a lot happens in day 6. And if you're thinking of looking at scientific proofs, that's going to be a long, that could be a long period of time, because we're talking about plant life, animal life. Bob is saying that in Genesis, it talks about, as I was just saying, just a comment just before Bob, is that there is light, day, light, and there is darkness, sunlight, sunrise, sunset. And that made the first day. And Bob is saying, how can you say that's potentially millions of years long if you're talking about light and darkness and what we know of as one day? I mean, it's an argument against us, certainly. Oh, that was the end of my slide. I couldn't remember.
That should have been the first one.
I couldn't remember if I had something else I was
Bob
saying about
answered
David.
the question. I'll go now.
That's the best.
The young earth theory, really, I think it's fair to say, came about by people who really want to take the Bible literally, who have looked at it, who want to be very careful in their interpretation of Scripture, and as take the Bible as literally as they can. And that's why they are, of these three, that's why they are postulating literal 24-hour days and a very short time ago for the creation of the earth. I was, gap theory, as I've already pointed out, there's nothing in the Genesis account that really gives any hint that there is a gap between verse 1 and verse 2 of Genesis 1. It's all speculation, it's all just an idea, and it's all really an attempt to explain things like, how does the earth appear to be old? Where did the dinosaurs come from? Day-age theory is also an attempt to explain why the earth is older than it is. Why the earth is older than 6,000 years. And it's an attempt to reconcile what we have learned in science versus what we read in Scripture. Day-age theory has a lot of adherents in Christianity and conservative, biblical, evangelical Christianity, even Assemblies of God. I could find many people who are strongly proposing day-age theory. I think I probably already kind of hinted at this. I find either any of these three an acceptable position for a Christian to take.
Was he writing it to tell them about how the earth was created, or is he writing to tell them something? Is there something else he's getting at by telling this? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was, the latter. That Moses has another purpose.
Why is December being the 10th month, the 12th month on the calendar? Noah's flood killed the dinosaurs, right?
Depends. Depends on who you ask.
Hey, it's a rabbit trail. Look at the rabbit trail.